Hello viewers, welcome to CodeForany. Online maintenance and service app insight. Today we need to see here the map location change. We need to get this here the exact points of the latitude longitudes value, and then after this latitude longitude is getting after, so need to find out here the actual address of this string address. We need to getting here using here the geocoding. Now, first of all, we need to install here the geocoding libs inside this Flutter projects. Now we need to go here in space and we need to write down here the geocoding. Maybe we need to find inside the code. We need to put here version 3 available of the last versions, and now we need to save here for geocoding slips. And now first of all we need to get this here the address of this latitude longitudes. How to find out inside these plugins, we need to explain here. We need to first of all the initialize here the to events methods. We need to calls here the change positions is the continue. If you change here the continue given this here the changes events, and one events also available here the this plugin inside the drag, and I need to always calls API inside the drag ends. Drag starts and drag ends is the most important events. If you use this here the position change, every time need to calling this here the API, and to every time need to calls the servers. This is not for the optimize. We need to optimize where need to use here because need to reduce this here the API calls. Now explains what is the difference between here the map events and position change. Now we need to go inside and to find out here the libs for the Flutter maps. Inside map options, we need to remove here the const value, and now need to write down here the on positions events here change, and we need to get this here the actuals value here the two parameters no needs. We need to actually no needs here, and we need to call this here the write down here the one functions here. We need to write here the bottom. Need to write down here the void update point, and we need to call this here the let and log. We need to get here for this location, and we need to calling this here not let and long wrong. Build context, and we need to pass this here the context variable like here. And how to get this here the let long. So now need to define here the another variable let and long. Let long is equal to, we need to calls here the controllers. Then after we need to find out here the camera. Then after we need to find out the points to latitude longitudes, because we need to given this here the points, because we need to upper layers inside to draw here the UI, and need to actuals heights. We need to find out these points. We need to needs here this points value. We need to calculate here first of all. Now we need to give this here the x and y. We need to give this here the point value of the screen. So need to given this here the math library. Need to import here these points, and here import this here the math library, because this is the class available inside the library. That's why I need to use this here the map. First of all, need to need this here the x-axis, means this point to this lines. This is the horizontal view. This is the x, and vertical view for the y. Now need to give this here x always the center of this pin. That's why I need to use this here the context dot width divided by 2. And how to find here y's, we need to calculate here for this view. Now need to go here the up inside the drawing here the stack. Need to check here here this map and this inside the this column size always the same. Now first of all need to calculate here the 13 this margins. Need to write down here temporary for the comments 13 plus we need to give this here the height 17, these portions for the 17, and now this is the scroll down and scroll up. Then after dotted lines with heights we need to get here the 16s need to plus here 16. This is the dotted line. And then after again so need to need this here the image heights for these controls need to give this here the 15. We need to put this here the 15s like this configures and to set here. Now we need to use this here the totals we need to around equal to 2010. Now need to use this here the value inside this point value, and this point to we need to get this here the latitudes of longitudes of these locations for the every times. That's why I need to write. If you change here the margins, always need to change this value. That's why to make sure if you change any margins and any control size, then to get here the wrong value. That's why I need to always make sure need to give this here the right value and right points. Otherwise need to show here the wrong address. Now need to printing this here and this let long to string semicolons. Open this here and to open this here the debug window, and we need to clear this here. Now we need to give this here the events here the updates maps options and to write down here the update points and to pass here the context like this settings here and to set here the const value, save here, and now need to change this here and to see this here every time move and to get this here the like this value for here. And this method is not good efficient because every time need to calling this here. If you use this here the paid API, there's many calls need to go and to your cost is the very high. That's why not use like this. Need to use another methods need to in this one. These clips are the providing here maps events. We need to get here. We need to calling here the on map events. We need to call here and we need to pass this here the callback events. We need to give this here the event and like here's now we need to again check here the conditions. If event source we need to check here this variable inside availables event source, and we need to give this here the value map event source. Need to give this here the brackets map event source dots. We need to call this here the drag and events, and now need to print here this log map and event drag and we need to show this here like this value and to call this event this context. Now need to move here scrolling here not get this here the log map drag and now need to calls here the drag and events like this again scrolls and to get like this here the make drag and events need to get this here the calling this here the reduce event like this. We need to getting here now need to commit this codes, and now need to how to find out here the latitudes and longitudes based on the address. Now need to use this here the geocoding libs. Need to import here first of all need to write down here the one variables needs for the showing here, so need to and to showing this data we need to set here the string and to give this here the pin address variable name. By default need to set here the blank. Now this showing here first of all need to find these titles and to showing this here per hours nodes need to like here's, and also scroll down here this container inside and show here. Now need to put here and to save this here. Then after we need to write down here the functions for the getting here the address events. Now need to wait and we need to set here the get let long and we need to address like this function's name, and now need to pass here the let and long, and we need to give this as a location. Asynchronous functions. Then after we need to write down here the try case. Always this hd this lib function use, always use here the try case. Maybe here not found address, then to get this here the null value and app is crash. That's why I need to prevent this here the crash. We need to use this here the try case, and also need to write down here the print and to call this here the errors to string like here, and to identify here the errors and to showing here why is get here the errors. Then after now we need to get here the functions. We need to call here await functions and to write down here place mark coordinates from here latitudes and longitudes. Now need to give this here the location latitudes and location longitudes like this sets, and to getting this here the value. But we need to return this here the error functions of the here's. Now need to write down here's list and to call this here place marker place marker and to give this here the address array inside to get here the list. That's why I need to write down here the array prefix. Now we need to getting like this here and to print here the if check conditions here. If address array is not empty, and to go inside and to print this here the variables of this address. Need to call this here address dot first and to string to print here's like here's. And then after need to save this here the variables of the pickup address objects. Maybe pin address is good for these variables. Address object is equal to need to get this here the address array first like here's. Then after pin address is equal to need to get here the value. First of all need to write down here the dollar signs and to many times we need to put because we need to address one by one, so need to showing here at set semicolons. Give this here the space, and first ones need to set here the pickup address pin address dot need to get here the name property. Then after paste here place. Then after need to show here the street value. Then after need to show here the sublocality type for here locality. Then after need to show here the sub administrator area. Typo. Then after administrative area, and last one is postal codes like these settings here. And to make sure you need to call this here the if mounted, and to call this here the set states events need to call here. And also make sure inside you need to call this here the functions, otherwise not working. Now need to create here, need to call this here the get address and let pass this here the latitude longitudes and look like this. Calling here now need to save, and need to also check here, scroll down and to move this map, and here get this here the address of this value, need to getting here, also need to change here, scroll over and change like this change. If you like this video, please give the thumbs up. If you're new user, so please subscribe my channels and press the notification bell icon. You can get every new video notifications and awesome content. If you have any questions, so please write down the comment sections. I will help you and sort out your issue. Everyone have a nice day. Goodbye and take care.